I was staring at myself in a mirror wearing a wedding dress I didn't choose, being fitted by a seamstress I didn't hire, for a wedding I didn't want. The ivory sheath clung to my frame with a precision that felt more like a straitjacket than couture. My mother, Margot Westwood, stood behind me with the clinical detachment of someone inspecting a painting she wasn't entirely sure deserved to hang in her gallery. "Take in the waist an inch," she said without looking at me. "Claire needs to appear disciplined." Disciplined. Not beautiful, not happy. Disciplined. Like I was a problem being repackaged. The seamstress nodded, pins glinting in her mouth, hands trembling ever so slightly. "You're lucky anyone would marry you after what you did," Margot added casually, like discussing the weather. And there it was, the line, the reminder. 6 months ago, I wasn't standing here. I was standing in my own boutique, West & Co., surrounded by racks of curated designs from emerging fashion talents, with a waitlist of Boston socialites eager for private appointments. My dream, my name, my risk. Everything was humming with promise. Until Lauren Burke emptied our joint accounts and vanished into the wind. $296,000 gone. Invoices unpaid, vendors enraged. My name plastered across page 6, heiress duped in designer scam. They didn't run her face. They ran mine. The photos were brutal. Me crying outside the boutique. Me being escorted out of the building by my landlord after defaulting on the lease. The media dissected me like a fallen debutante in a modern-day morality play. I wasn't a victim. I was entertainment. My parents, Daniel and Margot Westwood, acted quickly. First, they reclaimed the loft apartment, technically owned by Westwood Properties. Then the credit cards were shut off. My Mercedes disappeared from the garage overnight. And finally, the dinner, where they sat me down and told me they had a solution to salvage the narrative. His name was Ethan Rhodes. Margot's tone, as she introduced the concept of arranged marriage like a brand strategy, was so precise, I thought I was hallucinating. "A stable, sensible match," she said. "Someone respectable enough to reflect well on us, but forgettable enough not to disrupt the family image." "Forgettable?" I repeated. She didn't flinch. "You don't need passion right now. You need a reset." The door opened, and the reset stepped in. Average height, khaki suit, department store shoes, and a handshake that felt more business pitch than introduction. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Good for you," I replied. That was 4 weeks ago. Now I was being sewn into a dress I didn't choose, for a future I didn't authorize because two people who loved status more than they loved me decided this was the cost of my redemption. "Mom says you're being dramatic," Sophie whispered the night I crashed in her room. She was curled up in her bed wearing a Thompson Academy sweatshirt that was technically mine. "She says you've made your bed." "No, Mom made it," I snapped. "And now she's forcing me to lie in it. With a stranger." Sophie hesitated, eyes flicking toward her closed bedroom door. "I heard them. They've been planning this for weeks. It's not just about punishing you. It's about control." "Control of what?" "You." That night I didn't sleep. My body lay still, but my mind ran relays through every humiliation, every strategic move they made to corral me into obedience. The boutique hadn't just failed. It had been taken from me. I didn't just fall. I was pushed. The following morning, I met Ethan for coffee in the living room. He was drinking from a ceramic mug that read Rhodes Consulting in faded blue print. "Tell me something," I asked, crossing my arms. "Why did you agree to this? The marriage? Me." He sipped, calm, unbothered. "Because I understood the terms. This isn't a contract. This is my life." His eyes met mine for the first time that morning. "To people like your parents, there's no difference." Days passed like fog. I showed up for my job at Westwood Enterprises, an entry-level admin assistant buried under filing cabinets and coffee runs. My direct manager, Jennifer, clearly relished the power dynamic. "Claire, we alphabetize by client last name, not project code," she smirked one afternoon. "It's not the runway, but some of us take this job seriously." I smiled tightly and corrected the files, imagining what her reaction would be if I dumped my latte on her spreadsheets. Evenings were no better. I'd return to the apartment, Spartan furniture, no photos, no art, and collapse on a couch that still smelled faintly like warehouse dust. Ethan remained an enigma, quiet, polite, oddly observant, and frustratingly tolerant of the entire charade. Sometimes he'd watch me, really watch me, and I'd wonder if he saw me as a person or as some complex puzzle piece in the Westwood strategy board. One night, I woke up to find him gone. Again. The soft click of his office door closing reached me through the silence. I padded barefoot across the hardwood floor, heart pounding, unsure if it was rebellion or desperation that pulled me forward. I tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, I expected tax returns and LinkedIn profiles. Instead, I found 3 high-resolution monitors displaying international markets, Bloomberg terminals, algorithmic dashboards, and Ethan, no khakis, crisp white shirt, tailored slacks, talking into a headset in a voice completely unlike the one he used with me. The Milan deal closes at 5 Rs CET. I want legal to send revised language on Clause 12. Full transfer authorization by morning. He turned, saw me, paused the call. I'm not a junior analyst, he said simply, removing the headset. No shit, I whispered. He walked toward me, not hurried, not guilty. Then who are you? He smiled, a quiet, razor-sharp smile. Would you like to find out? If you've ever been punished just for wanting independence, type 1 in the comments. Because sometimes, the dress they force you to wear tells the real story they're trying to bury. The next morning, I got written up. Jennifer, my manager at Westwood Enterprises, marched into my cubicle like a storm cloud in nude pumps. She slammed a printed report onto my desk. You logged the meeting notes under vendor code rather than client ID, she said, loud enough for the entire department to hear. I stared at the page. It was a minor mistake, at most a formatting issue. But the way she looked at me, like a child who had spilled juice on her cashmere, made it clear this was never about filing. I'll fix it, I said quietly. She leaned down, voice syrupy. You were handed this job, Claire. Most of us had to earn it. Try to act like you belong here. Then she was gone. The report sat there like a bruise. No one made eye contact. That night, I didn't knock. I walked straight into Ethan's office. He was back in the tailored shirt, sleeves rolled up, tapping keys faster than I could follow. The room glowed with soft blue light from the trading screens. A Bloomberg terminal streamed Asian markets in real time. A second monitor displayed complex financial models that looked nothing like the spreadsheets I saw at Westwood. I need answers, I said, crossing my arms. Ethan looked up, calm as ever. Then ask better questions. You're not a consultant. You're not in financial services. What are you? He didn't hesitate. Just pulled open a drawer and slid a glossy business magazine toward me. The cover headline read, The Invisible Billionaire, Rhodes Equity's Mysterious Founder. There, under a shadowed silhouette, were the initials, ER. My jaw locked. You're Ethan Rhodes, the Ethan Rhodes. He nodded once. Founder and CEO of Rhodes Equity. Current valuation, $4.2 billion. And yes, I still make my own coffee. I staggered back a step. You lied to me. I withheld, he corrected. There's a difference. I narrowed my eyes. Why? Why marry into this circus and play house in a rental with peeling paint? He leaned back in his chair. Because your family is one of the most powerful real estate dynasties in the Northeast. Because I'd heard rumors, dirty financial moves, backdoor contracts, fabricated due diligence, and because I don't believe in investing in people I haven't vetted myself. So this marriage was a business decision? At first. He stood, crossed the room, and retrieved a tablet. With a few swipes, he opened a folder labeled Project Westwood. Dozens of documents, wire transfers, Shell Corporation data. I started digging after Lauren Burke disappeared. The timing, the speed, the structure. It reeked of coordination. He tapped a file. 2 weeks before she approached you about the boutique, your mother's foundation transferred $85,000 to a nonprofit tied to Burke's alias. A week after the collapse, another $50,000. Hidden through dummy accounts, but traceable. My throat closed. That's circumstantial, I whispered. Then let's add this, he said, bringing up a set of emails. Subject line, Claire's situation. From Gerald Knox to Margot Westwood. We've found a candidate with prior experience should serve as a firm enough lesson. I sank into the leather chair. They set me up, I said. Not to Ethan, but to the room. To myself. They didn't just abandon me after I failed. They made sure I did. Ethan's voice softened. They needed you broken, dependent, moldable. And you knew this when we got married? I suspected. I confirmed it 3 months ago. Why didn't you tell me? He hesitated. Because you weren't ready to hear it. Because you needed to find your own strength first. Information without power only deepens the wound. I closed my eyes. Memories flooded back. Margot calling the boutique a vanity project. Daniel refusing to co-sign the lease but wiring money secretly through Gerald. The tearful apology dinner that was never really about me. I'm going to burn it all down, I whispered. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Carefully, methodically, with strategy, not emotion. I turned to him, suddenly aware of his stillness, his calculation, his clarity. You're not just in this for the business anymore, are you? He studied me for a long beat. No. A pause. Then he smiled, barely. But I wouldn't have chosen this fight unless I believed in my partner. Partner. I hadn't realized how much I needed that word until now. The next day, we began. Ethan called in Dr. Helena Cruz, Rhodes Equity's chief strategy officer. She was the woman I'd noticed at our wedding, elegant, silver-haired, the only person who'd toasted me with any sincerity. She arrived at our apartment with a portfolio of documents and a voice like silk wrapped around steel. Your boutique wasn't a failure, she said, flipping through the financials. It was an emerging marketplace with strong positioning. You had the eye, Claire. You just didn't have a firewall against sabotage. She laid out a roadmap. Rebuild my reputation, expose the internal fraud, reclaim the boutique, but with bulletproof operations this time. Jade Lynn, my old friend and fashion designer, called me the same night. Margot had blocked her calls for months. Claire, she said, nearly crying, I tried to warn you about Lauren, but your mom kept telling me you were healing privately. Privately in exile, I muttered. Jade didn't laugh. Instead, she said, if you ever reopen, I'm in. I've got 3 lines ready to go, and I'd follow you anywhere. For the first time in months, I felt something other than numbness. I felt direction. Later that night, I returned to Ethan's office. He was watching financial news on mute, sipping coffee. I want in, I said. You already are. No, I clarified. Not as your charity case, as your equal. Let me help build the case. Let me understand what they did, line by line. He nodded, then stood and handed me a folder. Then start here, he said. We don't just expose fraud. We dismantle narratives. And rebuild something better? I asked. Only if you're ready. I stared down at the file, my file, the paper version of everything they tried to bury. I opened it. Let's begin. If someone once tried to erase your potential just to keep control, type 2 below. Because the truth doesn't just set you free, it gives you power. When the seating chart arrived, my name wasn't beside my parents'. At the Westwood's 35th anniversary gala, hosted at the Four Seasons Ballroom, curated to within an inch of perfection, I had been assigned a table far from the stage, next to the emergency exit. Intentional, Ethan noted dryly, glancing at the gold-embossed card. They're positioning you as the tolerated daughter, not the redeemed one. I stared at the names. Claire Westwood, Table 9. Same table as former employees, distant cousins, and one of my high school frenemies. I'm not tolerated anymore, I said. I'm a liability they're hoping to quietly contain. Ethan tucked the card into his jacket pocket. Not tonight. The night of the gala, Boston's elite descended like a flock of black swans. Crystal chandeliers shimmered. A live quartet played Vivaldi with robotic precision. My parents had spent months curating everything, from the imported white orchids to the slideshow of carefully selected legacy photos flashing on 20-foot LED screens. I wore crimson, a power red gown designed by Jade Lynn, cut with architectural precision. It sliced through the sea of navy and champagne like defiance given form. My hair was swept into a low knot, and around my neck was a choker of interlocking gold strands, deliberately chosen instead of the family pearls. The hush was audible when Ethan and I entered. His tuxedo, perfectly tailored, whispered wealth louder than any name could. He guided me through the door with a hand on the small of my back, not possessive, but present. My mother saw us immediately. Her smile faltered. Daniel, my father, tipped his glass in a reflexive toast, likely mistaking Ethan's face for someone he still underestimated. We navigated the room like diplomats. Every 10 steps, we encountered a ghost from my past, someone who had once praised me, then buried me. They offered thin-lipped smiles, comments like, "Claire, that color's unexpected. I heard you've been working in admin? Marriage suits you. Stability is good for girls like us." Victoria Graves, my mother's oldest social ally, greeted me with a champagne flute and surgical passive aggression. "You're glowing," she purred. "Or is that just the lighting?" Ethan responded first. "No, that's what rebuilding your life with integrity looks like." Victoria blinked. I smiled and walked on. 10 minutes before the first toast, we slipped into the AV booth. Grace, Helena Cruz, was already there, typing silently on a laptop. Jade stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes fierce. "Everything's loaded," Grace confirmed. "Visuals will cue automatically after the trigger slide. James has secured the system. No remote override." "Backups?" Ethan asked. "In triplicate," Grace said. "If Margot tries to pull the plug, she'll be yanking cords from a phantom feed." I turned toward the ballroom. Out there, guests sipped cocktails and admired framed photos of a marriage built on performance. Out there, my mother was preparing her speech about family resilience. And out there, I would detonate the truth. "You good?" Ethan asked quietly. "No," I whispered, "but I'm ready." The toasts began. Gerald Knox, my father's longtime fixer, was first. "35 years of Westwood legacy," he began, "built on vision, discipline, and above all, trust." I nearly laughed. 2 more speakers followed, each more saccharine than the last. Then came Margot. She wore pale blue, something soft, bridal, calculated. Her voice, as always, was perfectly modulated. "Marriage," she said, "is not just love, it's legacy. Daniel and I have weathered storms, but our foundation, like our company, is resilient. When our daughter faced her recent challenges, it was family that guided her home." She turned to me, that smug, icy smile I knew too well. "And tonight," she added, "we celebrate redemption." The audience applauded. My cue. I stood and walked to the stage. The hush came fast. I stepped into the light, heart slamming, blood roaring. Ethan moved behind me, calm as stone. Grace sat beside the AV laptop. James Wilson, our head of security, watched the exits. "Thank you, Mother," I began. "And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight." I paused, letting silence do its work. "We've heard tonight about values, integrity, resilience, family. Tonight, I'd like to offer you a story that embodies those very things." Click. Slide. 1. Claire Westwood. The boutique collapse. Gasps. Whispers. "I opened a boutique last year," I said. "It was my dream. Self-funded, self-managed. A risk, yes, but also a vision." Click. Slide 2. Lauren Burke. Known aliases. "Then my partner vanished. The press called it a scandal. My parents called it a failure. But what it really was sabotage." Click. Slide. 3. Transactions from Margot Westwood Foundation. I looked directly at my mother. "These are financial transfers from my mother's foundation to entities controlled by Lauren Burke," before she ever approached me. Margot stood. "This is absurd." Please, let me finish, I said, voice clear. It gets better. Click. Slide 4. Email from Gerald Knox. Claire's situation. My father's face turned gray. Click. Slide 5. Internal Westwood Enterprises memos employee blacklisting. This wasn't just a betrayal, I said. It was a coordinated attempt to destroy my autonomy, discredit my voice, and repackage me as a lesson. I turned toward the crowd, but I wasn't alone. Click. Slide 6. Ethan Rhodes, CEO of Rhodes Equity. Gasps turned into audible murmurs. Phones lit up. Journalists whispered. Yes, I said. The man my parents thought was a desperate consultant is actually one of the most powerful investors in the country. And he chose to marry me not because I was broken, but because I refused to be erased. Ethan stepped forward, calm, controlled. My father barked, "This is a personal ambush." "No," Ethan replied, his voice low and precise. "This is accountability." By the time we exited the stage, half the donors were already texting lawyers. Sophie appeared beside me in a navy gown, tears in her eyes. "They'll never forgive you," she said. "They never tried to love me," I replied. And just before we left the ballroom, I turned back and caught my mother watching me from across the crowd, her face frozen, her narrative collapsing. I didn't wave. If you've ever been forced to stay silent while someone else rewrote your story, type 3 below. Because some rooms are built on lies, and some women burn them down. 3 weeks after the gala, I received an envelope, not the usual embossed, gold-trimmed sort my mother preferred, but a legal-grade, watermark-sealed document titled Reconciliation Agreement. Inside, a carefully worded contract. My parents were proposing a staged reunion, appearances at select public events, a mutually beneficial press statement framing our rift as a family misunderstanding. In exchange, access to the family trust, a partial stake in Westwood Enterprises, and, my favorite clause, a moratorium on disparaging commentary. Ethan glanced through it once and snorted. They're not offering forgiveness. They're offering containment. They're trying to buy the narrative back, I said. I declined the offer with 6 words. I'll speak when it's the truth. In the weeks that followed, the fallout intensified. The Westwood board initiated an internal audit. Gerald Knox resigned for personal reasons, though his offshore accounts were frozen the next day. My father claimed ignorance, but internal emails leaked, some CC'd with timestamps showing he'd known for months. Margot went silent, canceling public appearances and quietly stepping down from 2 high-profile charity boards. Meanwhile, Rhodes Equity surged in media coverage. Ethan's long-held anonymity melted into curated visibility. He didn't seek the spotlight, but he no longer hid from it. And me, I got to work. Authentic Atelier launched quietly. No press releases, no influencer hype. Just a discreet reopening 2 blocks from my original boutique's ashes. But this time, I had a team. Jade Lynn as creative director, Grace as our strategic advisor, a tech-integrated back-end system to streamline sourcing, trace ethics and supply chains, and anonymize emerging designers for pure merit-based selections. The same instincts that once made me a liability were now my greatest asset. "You're not selling dresses," Grace told me. "You're selling credibility. That's what they can't duplicate." Even my therapist, Dr. Harrington, an expert in familial trauma, seemed surprised by my acceleration. "Most women in your position would have settled for vindication," she said during a Thursday morning session. "You're rebuilding." "No," I corrected gently. "I'm finally building." Sophie visited the store before opening week, walking the aisles with tears in her eyes. "I remember when you used to cut fashion magazine layouts and tape them to your dorm wall," she said, brushing a sleeve on one of Jade's new line. "And now, this." "This is mine," I said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim envelope. Inside, a mock-up of her new architecture firm's first design portfolio. Clean, modern, and completely independent of the Westwood aesthetic. I walked away, she said. It was terrifying, but freeing. We weren't raised to be free, I replied. We were raised to perform. She nodded slowly. And now we're rewriting the script. On launch night, we capped our guest list at 50. Not a single member of my parents' old circle was invited. Brianna Walsh, the PR executive who once helped bury me, requested an interview. I refused politely. My story wasn't a rebranding, it was a reclamation. Instead, we focused on our designers. Each one came from underrepresented backgrounds. Each one now had the platform my mother tried to destroy. Jade's showstopper gown, a deep plum sculptural piece made from repurposed silks, brought the crowd to its feet. As I stood backstage, watching the applause ripple through a space that bore my name again, Ethan stepped beside me. They tried to kill your business, he said. But it wasn't just your boutique they couldn't destroy. It was me, I finished. We left early that night. No champagne toasts or press photos. Just a quiet dinner at the same hole-in-the-wall Thai place we discovered during our so-called arrangement. As we sat across from each other, chopsticks tapping glass bowls, Ethan pulled something from his jacket. A small velvet box. Inside, not a diamond. A ring crafted from rose gold and meteorite, earth and sky in one piece. This marriage started in performance, he said. I'd like to restart it, with choice. I stared at the ring, then at him. I never thought I'd be the one being proposed to over pad thai. He smirked. I never thought I'd need someone, and then I met you. 2 months later, we were married again, this time on our terms. 20 guests, rooftop garden, no media, no legacy photos. My mother and father came. They sat in the 4th row, unannounced, uninvited, but not turned away. My mother wore gray. My father, a suit that didn't quite fit the moment. They didn't interrupt, they didn't speak, but they showed up. Afterward, my mother approached me with the stiffness of someone unsure of her place in a world she no longer controlled. The dress suits you, she said. A statement, not a compliment. I designed it, I replied, a fact, not an invitation. She gave a short nod and left. My father spoke with Ethan briefly, asking, almost too casually, about sustainable equity investing. I allowed it. That was the boundary now. Authenticity or silence. Anything else would be denied entry. 1 year after the gala, we established a tradition, a quiet dinner, no fanfare, no headlines. Just a simple meal where we asked each other the same question. What truth are you ready to live next? This year, I answered first. I want to open a second space, this time for young women recovering from financial sabotage, a safe incubator. Ethan raised his glass. Then let's make it real. As I toasted, I looked at him. This man who had walked into my life as a chess piece in my parents' manipulation, and stayed because we built something more honest than either of us imagined. They tried to teach me my place. I built a new one instead. If you've ever turned someone else's punishment into your foundation, type 4 in the comments, because some stories don't end when the damage is done. They begin when you reclaim the pen.